Eric is the president and founder of Sagatica. Eric's diverse and varied life is a commitment to understanding and teaching wisdom. He published his book, The 4 Virtues of a Leader, shares practical ideas and tools that deepen a leader's ability to be efficient, effective, and deliberate. A leader whom people are drawn to follow. The crucible of Eric's journey contains 16 years of leadership consulting, management at Fortune 100 firms, degrees in business and psychology, a quarter century of Zen practice, living in Israel and South Africa, teaching as a master scuba diving instructor, and working as a certified hypnotherapist. No, he will not be doing that today. I already asked him and he said no. But he will be trying to get us in the right frame of mind as we embark on some challenging years, months ahead. It's not going to get easier, but it is going to get more fun. And I think the way to get more fun is to get ourselves aligned in the right frame of mind and really thinking about what's right for the patient. And that's what this time is about. So in front of you, you should have also a breakout session form. Take a brief look at those questions. You don't need to do them while Eric is speaking. I actually don't want you to do them while Eric is speaking, but I want you to at least keep those things in mind. What are you going to take away from today? What are you going to incorporate into your leadership starting tomorrow based on what you hear from Eric? And then we'll kind of do some table exercises after Eric's talk, but I just want you guys to kind of start thinking about those things as you listen to Eric. So with that, I am going to stop talking and hand it over to Eric. Eric.
Good afternoon. So any kind of process of change, learning, growth, excellence, any kind of effort to be good at something is going to require that you focus on 3 dimensions of effort, right? One dimension is the dimension of mindset. How do you think about what you're doing? The mindset is the purpose, it's the why, it's the reason to go forward, it's the attitude that you hold in mind, that enables you to go forth and do what you're going to do, which brings us to the second part, skill set. Skill set is the actual competency, abilities, practices that enable you to do what you want to do, and use the third part, which is the tool set. The tools are the forms, the techniques, the methodologies, the frameworks. So mindset, skill set, tool set. Most conversations about most functions in organization tend to lie at the level of skill set and tool set. Often tools first, right? What are the forms? What are the processes? What are the frameworks? What's the method? How do we do this? How do we do that? That's the tools. You guys all know tools, right? Yeah, and tools are necessary to get the job done. Skill set is, well, how do you effectively use the tools? Because if you have a tool and you don't know how to use it, it's not that useful. And the mindset is where you go to actually be able to activate the skills to put forth the effort to use the tools to get the job done. Make sense so far? I'm not going to talk about skills and I'm not going to talk about tools today. I want to talk about mindset. I want to talk about the attitude, the approach, the way that you think about what you have to do, in particular in this conversation about leadership. And so when I was thinking about preparing for presenting to you today, I was thinking about what does everybody ask me inevitably when I have this conversation about leadership. And one of the questions that comes up every time is this one. What is the difference between management and leadership? You guys ever thought about that? Maybe you haven't because you're so damn busy right now. But if you stop to think about it, you'd wonder, like, what's the difference between management and leadership? So here's one way to think about it. It's an important way because it sets up the whole conversation about what is your role, your contribution, what is your responsibility as a leader. So both managers and leaders balance something. So it's a balancing act, right? But what managers balance, on the one hand, is resources. There's stuff that you have, time, people, money, material, inventory. Those are resources, right? What you have to balance it against is objectives. Objectives are specific outcomes that you have to produce, right? So the objective is get this done in this amount of time with this amount of people and this budget. Sound familiar? You have objectives. Management by objectives is a common term that we use. So to the degree that you effectively balance resources and accomplish the objectives, you're doing a great job managing. And the real clue to me is interesting in the word manager. For an extra bonus, which I don't know what it is, but I'm sure Tracy will be happy to give it to you. What do you think is the origin of the word manager? Manage. Oh, you're safe today, Tracy. It comes from the Latin word, from manus, which means what? Hand. So manager literally means, the language literally means to handle. A good manager is somebody who can handle things. And what do you handle? You handle resources in order to put the puzzle together to meet the objectives. Does that sound familiar? So let's talk about leadership then. It's a different set of balancing factors. In the leadership realm, what you have to balance is results, not just objectives. Objectives are concrete outcomes. Results are organizational, they're organizational-wide, they're team-wide, they're department-wide. These are things that haven't happened before. These are new achievements. And what balances against the results in this construct is what brings up this whole interesting discussion about the mindset of leadership. What you get to balance against results is uncertainty. It's uncertainty because you don't know how many resources it's going to take to accomplish these results. You don't know how long it's going to take. You don't even know if it can be done. It's uncertain. And that to me is the primary distinction between management and leadership. One is about handling resources. The other is about navigating uncertainty to accomplish previously unaccomplished outcomes. And the word leader beautifully completes this thought because leader comes from Anglo-Saxon, Old English. The word that it comes from is litan. And litan means to travel, to go. The point of leadership is to be on a journey. The point of management is to handle resources. This is not an either-or discussion. When they say, is it management or leadership? What are you talking about? There's no competition, but there is a distinction. When I was in college and studying psychology, there was this big debate about nature versus nurture. Do you guys remember that? Nature versus nurture. I was like 20 years old, busting my head trying to figure out, what is it really? Is it nature, is it nurture? I have 2 children. That is not a debate. It's nature and nurture, right? They have come into this world with their own nature. Anyone have kids? Yeah, right? And I have successfully downloaded all my neuroses and anxieties into them. That's nurture. But the distinction of either or, that's in the same way. Management versus leadership, that's not worth the conversation. The question is, when do you manage, when do you lead, and are you bringing the right mindset to it? And so, in the realm of leadership, there are, to me this is a very simple definition of leading. Organizing and influencing people to achieve meaningful results. Organizing, getting people to work together, to collaborate across functions, to work in synergy, to team together in the same direction. That's what organization is about. It's moving together in the same direction. And influencing means that you have to capture their hearts and their minds so that they want to do what needs to be done. Not just because they have to do what needs to be done. So it's organizing and influencing to achieve meaningful results. In other words, things that haven't happened before that have some value, some meaning. Otherwise, it's just a grind. So in this realm then, from the work that I've done over the past 16 years in Sagatica, in our firm, we have a leadership model. And we look at what are the elements that are then required to effectively execute this role of leadership. And so the results, to me, is a triple bottom line. How many people have heard of that, triple bottom line? 2 of you? Okay, so the rest of you will be educated now. So the triple bottom line is just that. It means that you are moving towards having effective outcomes in profits. And whatever profit means in a for-profit and non-profit, it always means that there's a financial health of the organization. That's one. The other is people. Because if you're just profitable, but the people are being destroyed, the community is unattended to, lives are being upended. As I was once in a meeting and somebody says, this was a soul-crushing environment. Whoa. That is not, you only have one soul and one life from what I can tell. I mean, I'm 25 years, almost 30 years now in deep, real Zen practice. I still don't know about any of this afterlife stuff. It's this one life. Soul crushing is not cool. If you're the leader that only focuses on profit but not people, you're missing something. And if you're focusing on profit and people, there's still the planet. What about the environment? What about the other communities? What about the rest of the globe? What about future generations? To me, that's the focus. That's the results responsibilities of leadership. People, profit, and planet. Whether you're the CEO of the organization, the new supervisor, director, the managers, it doesn't matter what role, whether you're a leader who has no title of leader, but you're organizing and influencing people. It's a mindset. It doesn't just mean that you have the title. It means that you have an attitude, you have a certain approach, and you have certain abilities, as I described right in this next one. The commitments I think about that you make as a leader. There's a commitment to being strategic. I call it the strategist. What does that mean? It doesn't mean you have to come up with a strategic plan, but it means that you are thinking big picture about purpose, about why, about integrating, about what's coming around the corner. There's the resultant, right? You got to get stuff done. You plan, you execute, you implement, you solve problems. There's another responsibility, the commitment to be the transformer. Oh yeah, change is something that you might know a little bit about, but the transformer is not somebody who just withstands change and says, oh, get me that red wine, the white wine, the craft beer, whatever your thing is. That's how you sort of recover from intense change. The transformer recognizes that part of your commitment is to embrace and drive change, because without it, there is no conversation about leadership. So strategist, resultant, transformer, the connective responsibility is about actually building communities. It's called teams, it's called cross-functional alignments, it's called culture, it's called synergy, and then the coach. The commitment to actually bring out the inherent beauty and power and potential and intelligence and care in each person. Those are the 5 commitments of the leader. And at the heart of that is what I refer to as the 4 virtues of a leader, which is in front of you all, 300 or so pages, and I'm just going to spend the next bit of time that we have diving into that, because to me that is the core, the essence, the foundation of this mindset that activates the commitments and gets to the results. So, 4 virtues, conveniently. Each one of them answers a question. Focus answers a question, what am I creating? And I'll elaborate these in each in turn. Courage asks the question, what am I avoiding? I've found that I don't avoid things that are really fun. I tend to avoid the things that are a little anxiety-provoking, scary, uncomfortable. Grit. You guys familiar with the term grit? How many Southerners here? Anyone from the South? So it's not that grits. It's a mindset of grit. Grit answers the question, what am I sustaining? Grit is, to me, one of the interesting pieces of the conversation. They all are, but I'll tell you my quick definition of grit. It's when you apply yourself, it's applying yourself when you have no enthusiasm. If you're enthusiastic, you don't require grit, right? If you're motivated, you don't need grit. Grit is that fundamental virtue that you draw on when you're disheartened, frustrated, and completely unmotivated. And I'll get more to that. And then faith. And I'm not actually talking about any religious denomination in particular. I'm talking about the leap of faith. It asks the question, what am I letting go? We are hypnotized, so to speak, in the culture to believe that growth and evolution always means more. And in a leadership role, it always at some point means less. By less, I mean you have to let something go. Because if you take it on, continue to take it on, do it yourself, do it individually, do it independently, are you really leading? Maybe some of the time, but part of the role of leader is to let go. And you have to pass it on. What am I surrendering? What am I letting go? So those are the things I'm going to dive into here in the time that we have. And I'm going to start, as I was thinking about these virtues, with, hey, it was circa 1990. That was fashionable then. Yep. My brother looks okay. Not sure who was dressing me. So, and maybe it makes sense to what I'm going to tell you about this picture. So this picture is taken around a time where I had just broken up with another girlfriend. Now that I look at it, it's not really surprising. This was the 3rd girlfriend in a row. I was in my mid-20s, and I was really, really confused. Like, what's wrong with all these women? One after the other after the other. And the only conclusion I could come to was that the women born between, 1965 and 1970 are just, culturally flawed. And so I went to my mentor at the time, one of my spiritual teachers. His name was Morris. And I said, Morris, can you tell me the secret formula for attracting and landing the perfect girlfriend. I was like in my early 20s, in my defense, right? And why did I go to Morris? He was a mentor. He was somebody who was very deep and experienced. He was old. He was probably pushing 55, 56. And remember, when you're 23, you don't trust anyone over 30. So Morris was up there. Oh, and he was married for the third time. So the guy really knew his stuff. And so I went and I said, Morris, what is the secret to the perfect girlfriend? So he started asking me questions. Well, what about this girlfriend you just broke up with? And what about this girlfriend before her? And what about the one before her? And I'm thinking, I don't know where you're going with this, Morris. Just tell me the 3 steps, A, B, C. This is before Google, by the way, right? This is before Amazon. I needed to go to a human. And so he said, okay, well, what about your friends? What about coworkers? What about your family? 20 minutes into this conversation, I'm thinking, I am wasting my time. Clearly, Morris has no idea. Why are you asking me all these questions? Morris says, well, what do you hear when you give me all the answers? I'm hearing that you're wasting my time, quite frankly. He said, no, what is the themes that are coming up here? What's the common denominator? What was the common denominator? Wow, you guys are sharp, right? My clothing? No, it was the stash, is that it? Yeah, so, yes, all that. And he said, you're the common denominator. And I said, what about it? He said, well, here's what I'm hearing when you describe your relationships at work, in love relationship, with family, at play. Eric, you are insecure, needy, and self-centered. Wow, thanks, Morris. I'm definitely not paying for that salmon. And I got to thinking about it, and I thought, wow, he's right. I was insecure, needy, and self-centered. And the women that I was with at some point realized that that's not who they want to be with. I have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old. I'm super delighted that all the women I dated left me at the time. I would want for my daughters to leave that kind of guy too. And he said to me, don't worry about finding the perfect woman. He said, Eric, I have one task for you, and if you're willing to take it on, I promise you, you will find the right woman. I was like, all right, what? Does it involve shaving anything or dressing differently? He said, no, it's a whole lot more difficult than that. He said, are you the kind of man that would attract the kind of woman that you would want to be with? Are you the kind of man that would attract the kind of woman that you would want to be with? And the answer at the time was what? No. No, clearly no. And he said, don't worry about finding the woman, go out and become that man. Whatever that means, right? That's kind of, oh, thanks, Morris. It means I had to grow up. It means I had to recognize first and foremost, and this is where this comes into this notion of focus. This is about focus. What are you creating? It means that our world is our reflection. My world is my reflection. I draw towards me people who resonate with me, not in some cosmic way, but in the simple interpersonal dynamics that we create with one another. Are you the kind of leader that attracts the kind of team that you want to be with? Are you the kind of community person that attracts the kind of friends that you want to be with? Are you the kind of woman that attracts the kind of man? Are you the kind of man that attracts the kind of woman? Essentially what we're being pointed to here is that you are always co-creating your experience. You are responsible for your experience. Now, are circumstances important? Absolutely. Do conditions matter? Absolutely. Do things happen that are out of your control? Does anything happen out of your control? Maybe not in this group. I know in my household, in my life, it's constantly out of control. And I am co-creating. I am responsible for my life. Does that make any sense? When I then went out to work for 12 years, I adhered to that concept of becoming the kind of man. And there was literally a moment in my life, I'm not kidding you, there was a moment in my life when I woke up and I realized, I am that guy. Where is she? It took her like a year to show up. But there was a moment when I realized I could live with myself. And I could have someone else live with me, and we could live together in a partnership that made sense. And so, if you like what you have around you, celebrate the fact that you're participating in that. If you don't like what's going on around you, celebrate the fact that you're participating in that. Focus says, what am I creating? And you're always creating. And how do you do that? Rather than making it so mystical, here, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. I do not see the world as it is. And how do I know that? Because when we're in a meeting and there's 150, 200 people here, and I would ask you, each one of you after the conversation, what did you think about what you heard? There'll be about 150 versions of what came out, right? Yeah. because you don't see the world as it is. Yes, there's data, there's facts, there's color, there's sound, but then you make it your own. And so how do you make it your own? And what does that mean in terms of leadership? It means that you are bringing yourself to your leadership role and you are co-creating the experience you're having. You have a responsibility in it. The first place you do it with is your beliefs. Your beliefs. Beliefs are ideas, they're judgments that we hold to be true. Right? I believe something. So if I believe that children should be, what was the expression in the old days? Should be seen and not heard? Yeah, that was a belief, right? That was one way then that would have certain consequences. If I believe that my children should be empowered, then when they are in fact empowered, sometimes I regret that, to be honest. Empowered teens, I'm not sure that's a brilliant idea, but I believe that's important. So, I believe that people bring their best to the effort of the team. It has one kind of consequences. I believe that people are basically selfish and withheld. That has another. Are you following where I'm going with that? Your belief then, what your beliefs do is they set expectations. Expectations are strong anticipation of something that will happen. So so Sarah is a director in an organization, and she is now frustrated because her team isn't coming up with the level of innovation that she knows they have in them. So Sarah and I got to talking. I said, well, are they paid enough? It's always a good question, right? Because we can talk about beliefs and creation, but if somebody's underpaid, they're probably not that engaged. Are they paid enough? Yes. Do they have good work environment? Yes. Okay, so what's going on? It's not environmental. Sarah says, I don't know what it is. I go into the meeting at the end, at some point, I'm the one who's coming up with all the ideas. Ever met Sarah? Yeah. Maybe you've seen Sarah in the mirror on occasion, I don't know. But, I said to Sarah, so how come it is you're coming up with all the ideas? Oh, I just have the best ideas. Okay. Fair enough. We dug a little bit deeper. I'll skip the long story. Bottom line is Sarah is one of 3 sisters. Her older sister was the athletic one. Her middle sister was the bad attitude one. And Sarah was the smart one in the household. You see where this is going already? So the smart one, because she really was smart, was then realized that she could stand out and get attention for being what? Smarter than who? Everybody else, right? Certainly her sisters. And so that worked really well in elementary school, right? Middle school, high school, college, into the job. Every time, Sarah's a smart one. So Sarah is super smart. She expects what of people around her then? They're what? Not as smart. Not as smart as her. She has to be the smartest one in the room. Her expectation is people won't be as smart. So then you go into behavior. How is she behaving? A little condescending, right? Maybe she trumps the idea. Oh, I have this idea. Oh, great idea. If we only did this on top of that, it would be even better. Good idea. Love it. Right? So she believes she's a smart one. She expects everyone's going to be just a little bit less smart than her. She behaves in such a way that demonstrates her intelligence. What does that lead to? The results that people are doing what? They are what? Not participating. They're silent. They don't want to be browbeaten and dismissed. And what does that prove to her? She's the smartest woman in the room. Congratulations. Are you already reflecting on this in your personal experience? I don't know who's Sarah and who's Brad and who's Al and who's Eric, but this is what we do. We have this loop of co-creation. We are actively creating our reality. I was a selfish, needy, insecure character that thought that I needed women who would just dote all over me to prove to me that I was worthy. So I was sucking the marrow out of them in order to fulfill myself, and they left. I've never said it out loud like that. It's really embarrassing. That's really uncool. We'll strike that from the tape. So you are always creating, and the pieces I'm most concerned for you are these beliefs that are called limiting beliefs. A limiting belief is a strong expectation of something that predicts your behavior and choices. And the limiting beliefs oftentimes in the course of change, transition, difficulty, which is, by the way, leadership. Leadership happens when you're balancing results with uncertainty. Uncertainty is the inevitable reality within which you're operating and getting results, getting things done. Limiting beliefs are, this is too hard. I can't do it. We can't do it. It's all up to me. If I can figure this out, this would work out really well. How come somebody else is not stepping up? Are you hearing these are all the conversations in your head? And my invitation to you is to reflect on what are the beliefs that you're holding to be true, and meaningful that may not be. Just because it's a belief you hold, it doesn't mean it's real cosmically. It doesn't mean that it's real for you in the moment. And the limiting beliefs over time hold us back. They're a big ball and chain that prevents us from soaring and flying and leading. And so the invitation to you, if you're thinking even as simply as that beliefs, expectations, behaviors, results, if there are certain results that you are not happy with, take a look at what are the behaviors that you're contributing to it. Reflect on what are the expectations you have of people around them, and really dig into what do you believe to be true in that case that's driving those results. And be willing, be at least curious to shift it and change it. So that's the first place to start from, because what this enables you is it enables you to be in a place of responsibility, able to respond. Otherwise, you're in a place of reactivity, buffeted by the forces all around you, feeling disempowered, unable to affect, and therefore not really in a leadership mindset. So even if you were given the best skills and the best tools, and you believe that you are not empowered in your mind, you do not have the capacity to make a difference, you will not use the skills and you will not use the tools. So what is holding you back? What limiting beliefs are holding you back? You're not going to answer this in the next minute here, but I'd love for you to reflect on it, because it gives you an immediate ability to accelerate your effectiveness and to get some energy into your life. Virtue 1, focus. And I'm asking you not only to reflect on it, but to willingly consider doing something differently with it. Doing something different, changing it. And so when you change, inevitably, I don't know about you, I remember standing at my wedding and feeling profoundly anxious. Anyone here gotten married ever? Maybe once or twice, 3 times? Yeah? Am I the only one? I remember standing there and like, oh my God, what am I doing? And I totally loved, to be fair, we got engaged 3 months from our first date. And we got married 6 months from that engagement. No, she wasn't pregnant, in case you're wondering. But 9 months from our first date, I'm standing at the altar with her about to get married. So maybe it was justified anxiety. I was thinking, who the hell is this person? But you can be anxious even when something is a real positive change. You can be scared if it's any kind of change. It's what happens. And so we have to talk about this notion of courage, because fear comes up. Fear is the gatekeeper to power. I am not talking about nuclear power, world power. I'm talking about your capacity to have energy, life force, to be empowered. Fear is the gatekeeper to power. To the degree that you are not willing to step into that fear, it is holding back your life force. And you know that because I bet every one of you, every one of us has had the experience of doing something that was really scary, coming out on the other side, and feeling more alive. Is that familiar? It's familiar. We can do that. And I want to talk about how can you do that more often, because in the leadership realm, fear is inevitable. Remember, we're talking about uncertainty. We're talking about transition, change, which, by the way, has a lot to do with leadership and is much bigger than leadership. The fundamental nature of the universe and everything in it is transition, is impermanence, it's change. Kinetic energy and what's the opposite of kinetic energy? Potential energy. Yeah, I knew you guys were going to shout it right away. Kinetic energy and potential energy. I mean, everything in the universe wants to move from state to state, from a fixed state to a flowing state, from a flowing state to a fixed state, and back and forth and forth and back. So change is the inherent nature of reality. And we get stuck because it's threatening, and we get fearful. And so this is stupid. There is no good reason to do this, because as exciting as it is, I don't actually know what she's doing, because it makes me a little sick to look at it, so I'll let you have the pleasure. This is not what I'm talking about, though, but the concept is what I'm talking about. So here's my definition of courage. It's walking toward what you'd rather run away from. Walking toward what you'd rather run away from, period. That's the definition of courage. Notice that nothing in here talks about being fearless. Anyone ever sort of gotten into that whole conversation about fearless? It's not worth having. If somebody's selling you that you'll be fearless, I mean, be aware. There's some gimmick on the back end. You're going to lose money. Just saying. And how do I know that? Because the human experience, the ego, our sense of identity, our neural system, our biology is based in survival and the perception of threat intellectually, emotionally, interpersonally, physically. We are so associated with fear, it practically defines what it means to be alive. So the notion of being fearless is not an invitation in this conversation. My wife, okay, I brought in my daughters, now it's the turn for my wife. It's all good, by the way. Because Shannon will tell her if it's not, so, you know. My wife's a forensic psychologist. You guys know what that is? A criminal psychologist. So she, for the last 20 some odd years, has been interviewing and evaluating criminals. Murderers, pedophiles, you know, folks like that. Not making the best choices in life, to be sure. The reason I bring it up is that one of the definitions in the DSM-5 now, which is the big statistics manual on mental abnormal psychology, is the description of fearlessness as part of psychopathy. So if you're a psychopath, you don't have fear. Is that really an aspiration for everybody here? Good, I'm glad not. Some people like that. I'm not into that crowd. So fearless is not the option. Courage is an option. Courage is just walking towards what you'd rather run away from. And there's a couple times that you can see fear showing up in the organization that doesn't look like fear. So I want to give you a few clues on what fear might look like so that you know where to apply courage. This is blame. Why would somebody blame? Is it a place of courage? Is it a place of responsibility? Is it accountability? Is it leadership? To me, leadership and blame are mutually exclusive. Because leadership is about responsibility. Does that mean that stuff happens out of your control? Every day, all the time. But blaming is fear-based. And I saw the example when my youngest daughter, my brother has two daughters, and his younger daughter is just older than my younger daughter. So my niece, Cassidy, was alive for 3 or 4 years before Maya came along. So do you know what it's like when a little person has all the attention sucked away from them by an infant? She's not real fond of that. And it's not like we can intellectually talk about it, like, you know, we still love you, Cassidy, just give Maya some space. It's much more visceral. So Cassidy essentially, you know, harassed Maya for 2 solid years because she wanted what? Attention. She wanted to get rid of the competition. You know, this is very early childhood stuff. And I'd be frustrated. I'm like, Ron, control your child. You know, come on, get a grip. And one day the two families were together. The kids are around the corner in the living room. We were in the dining room eating, and I heard this loud screech. Ah! I can't do it. Little girl screech. My throat's not built for it. Sorry, it sounded like a dying dolphin of some kind. But, you know, this loud screech of a young child in pain. So we bolt off from the table, we run around the corner, and what do I see? I see Cassidy, you know, sitting on the floor, my niece, and I see Maya, my now 2-year-old daughter, retracting her face from her shoulder, right? Kind of a spittle line still connecting her teeth to her shoulder. She clearly did what? She bit her. She bit her nice and square right in the shoulder. I mean, not nice and square. I mean, awful on the shoulder. And to be fair, when I walked in there, my first reaction was like, about time, you know? And my wife's like, I hope you didn't say that out loud. But I did think that. So mea culpa, I apologize. I did think that. My second thought was, well, what do I do as a parent? Right? So I said, Maya, did you just bite Cassidy? She looked straight at me and said, what? No. I'm like, yeah, right. It's like parenting tests one after the other. Regardless of what I did or didn't do, why did she say no? She'd get in trouble, right? She didn't want to be held to account. She didn't want to be in some kind of, you know, she didn't want to experience the withdrawal of love that happens when a parent is mad at their child. And to little kids, that's all they're experiencing. They don't really get cognitively what's going on. All they experience is, Dad doesn't love me right now. Dad is withholding his love. They're afraid of that. It's very anxiety-provoking. And so they say, no, I didn't do it. We grow up and we do the same thing. We blame. I didn't do it. Can you see how that's not a leadership move? It's fear-based. And so take a look and observe. If you're blaming, if someone else is blaming, you can ask a question. What are we really afraid of here? That's the question to ask. Not just a question, well, it is your fault. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. Because now you're not much more than Maya and Cassidy. right? But the question is, what are we really afraid of? So blaming is one. Here's another one that comes up in organizations on occasion, maybe not in this organization. Anger. Anger. Right now, anger is like sexy in the media. We've taken it all the way to like, the highest office. Anger is cool. Anger is power. Anger is, the natural inclination to want to overcome an obstacle. That's why we have anger. Think about the last time you got angry, right? You felt what? Threatened and out of control. Is that fair? You felt threatened and out of control. Underneath anger, always there's fear. When you feel your own anger, one, get out of the room, go for a walk. It takes like 15 minutes to metabolize the adrenaline that got triggered right away when you got angry. But underneath anger is fear. If you're experiencing yourself angry, ask yourself, what am I afraid of? If someone else is angry, ask them, what are they afraid of? Not in that moment, by the way. I learned that the hard way. Not in that moment. Let them chill and come back to their rational state. There's another one here, which is one of my favorites. It's called micromanaging. Oh, wait a minute, we got a reaction. Micromanaging. Why does somebody micromanage? For those of you who have experienced it. What are they looking for? Control, right? What's under the desire for control? Anxiety. What if this doesn't get done, doesn't get the right way, doesn't get done the right time, doesn't get done on budget? How do I know that you will do it the right way? This is my way, do it my way, do it my way. My way is right. How do I know it's right? Because it's worked in the past, so do it my way. Really sexy. Yeah. By the way, all the managers I've talked to over the past 16 years of coaching managers and leadership teams, and I've asked them, do you like micromanaging? The person who's been identified as a micromanager, none of them said yes. The folks who are micromanaging don't like to micromanage. They're just not sure how else to get it done. Underneath micromanaging is fear, a need for control, and a serious sense of anxiety and no ability to affect the outcome. So, I don't know how you turn to your manager and say, hey, what are you afraid of? But maybe you're the ones who are currently doing a little micromanaging, and you can reflect on what you're afraid of. And I'll show you what some of these things that you are afraid of that you can answer that question. The last one I want to bring up is sarcasm. From the Greek word, yes, I like languages. English is my second language. I'm not even kidding. I did not grow up speaking English. Any guesses of the wild accent that I don't have? German, no. Although my last name is German, so that's a good guess. Yeah. I was born in Israel. I grew up in Israel, so I grew up speaking Hebrew, and I learned English as a teen. So I am really into what do the words actually mean, because the first book I ever read in English was Shogun. Do you guys remember that book? It was a monster of a book. And I was like 16 years old, big, giant book. I had an enormous dictionary that I was flipping through to find out what the words mean. And how many read Shogun? Okay, I was into like the whole, what are ninjas and samurais and stuff, so I thought it'd be cool. There are words in there that are transliterated Japanese words. And I don't know this because I don't really know English. So I'm going to the dictionary trying to figure out what these words are, and they're not in a dictionary. Thinking this is really not a good start. Sarcasm comes from the Greek word sarkzein. Sarkzein in Greek means to rend the flesh, to cut. The point of sarcasm is to incapacitate somebody. I grew up with 3 brothers. We know sarcasm. We do sarcasm. And why is sarcasm so effective? Because it does shut the other person up, right? It's a power play. And sarcasm to me is a little bit like, I was thinking about this, is like the spices in Thai food. Anyone like Thai food? I'm a huge fan of Thai food. So in Thai food, they say, how spicy do you want it? You guys will have your answer, right? 3, 5. I love it when my mom goes 11. Really blows them away. She means it. So, like a little bit of sarcasm, it's really funny. And it can take a sting out of the room, right? It can relax people. It's a good way to change the mood. A lot of sarcasm, it's burning you, man. And when I work with leadership teams in particular, there is a direct correlation between the height of sarcasm and the lack of trust. Direct correlation. The higher the sarcasm, the lower the trust. It has never failed me. Because sarcasm is intended to be a way to cut somebody down. And it comes out of fear. So the invitation to you is when you see somebody, or you forget somebody, you caught yourself being sarcastic, Maybe you did because you listened to this conversation. Next time you're you heard this, let's see, 2 o'clock. At 3 o'clock in your next meeting, when you're feeling the sarcasm rise, you can ask yourself, what am I really wanting to protect here? Because it will increase trust. And if you need one thing as a leadership team, and one thing as a leader is trust. Because trust is the fundamental coin of exchange without which people will not engage, not open themselves, not give their best selves, not really show up as a human. They will just comply like a machine. And when you do these behaviors, when you're angry, when you're sarcastic, when you're blaming, you are diminishing trust and you are reducing your capacity to affect change and leadership. You are disengaging people. So ask yourself, what am I afraid of? And there are 3 sort of basic fears that show up over and over and over, certainly in the workplace and even beyond the workplace. Fear of failure. We talked about control, though I talked about control. Fear of failure is this out-of-control feeling, right? I don't want to fail. Fear of rejection is so powerful that it lights up in the brain the same regions as actual physical pain. And fear of humiliation is this sense that we are just not worthy. So what we're really afraid of is, in the fear of failure, I don't want to be powerless. I don't want to be powerless, right? Fear of rejection is I don't want to be unloved. So I'm just going to stay real quiet because if I say something, they push me out of the in-group, now I feel rejected, and that's painful. Or the fear of humiliation, which is I'm going to feel stupid, unworthy, small, worthless. So there's 3 types of courage that need to be awakened for you in the workplace as a leader, as a participant, as an individual contributor, as a manager, regardless of your title. The courage to commit. The courage to commit is willingly looking at the fear of failure and saying, I'm going to go forward and I'm going to give myself to it. The courage to care is the willingness to be vulnerable, open, connecting with other humans. Because the fear of rejection is so intense, we want to pull back. But there's something so remarkably seductive in the art of vulnerability. When my heart is open and I show up as a caring human being, people respond with like behavior. Have you noticed that to be true? Because the opposite is true too, right? When you don't care, I forget who said this. There's a great quote, and I'll have to remember who said it. This is some time ago in the remember the 80s? Yeah, it's when I was dressing like that. They said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I don't remember who said it, but it's a beautiful statement. So the courage to care, and then the courage to speak up. So, how do you do that? Right? You're saying, okay, be courageous. How do you cultivate this courage? Here's how you cultivate courage in 3 simple steps. And it takes a lot of practice. As one of my teachers once told me, the things that are important in life, rarely are they complicated, but they're not easy. So it's simple, but not easy. The first thing, for example, if I want to speak up, I'm sitting in a meeting and I have an idea and I'm going to speak up, but suddenly I get gripped with this thing like, oh, if I speak up, what if they think I'm stupid? What if it's the wrong idea? What if he, boss man, doesn't like it? Make sense? So first thing I have to do is feel it. This is not a cognitive process. It's an embodied experience. The first thing to do is, what does it feel like? Hey, what does it feel like to be anxious, by the way? Think of yourself sitting in a meeting and thinking, I should speak up, but I'm not. I'm holding back. You're anxious. What does anxiousness feel like? What does it feel like physically? Heart racing. What else? What is it? A little louder. I have a mic. You guys don't.
Stomach aches.
Stomach ache, right? It's actually like, who calls them butterflies in the stomach? Those are not butterflies. Those are like raptors. So I've got things in my gut. My heart is racing. A couple others. What else? What happens physically? Sweating palms, right? The skin sweats. What else? Your breathing is shallow and captured, right? So what the issue is with courage is that the very act of fear is so aversive to us, we'd rather just not feel it. So we want to distract ourselves. How do we do that? You can think through it. You can distract yourself. Now we all have phones. There's infinite distraction right in our hands, right? You can go exercise, you can eat, you can drink, you can socialize. The list goes on and on. If you're feeling in that moment, in the meeting, the desire to speak up and you're frightened, the first thing I invite you to do is just feel it. Oh, there's my heart. There's my stomach. Well, there's no butterflies here. There's my sweaty palms. And then what? That's not enough because that doesn't get you there. You have to face it. But in the feeling of it, 3 breaths. For a space of 3 breaths. I'm not saying sit there for an hour and stew in it. I'm saying just pay attention. Feel it for a moment. When you feel it, you know what you've already done? You've turned on your courage. You've not turned away from it. You are facing it. You are feeling it. You're engaging with it. The second part is you face it. What is it? Name it. If you can name it, you can tame it. What is it? I'm afraid that I'm going to sound like an idiot. I'm afraid that I'm going to be rejected. I'm afraid that if I do this, my job might be compromised. And then you can ask yourself, is this rational? Because usually it isn't. But it's real to you in the moment. Feel it, face it, which means give it a name, look at it, and then the last thing you do is you embrace it. You actually move one step into it. I'm not saying now stand on the table and declare your truth. You might have gone too far. It could be fun though. That's Disney, right? That's the movies. I'm saying, what would 10% more action look like for you in that moment? Rather than not speaking up or speaking everything, what does 10% look like? Embrace it. Move towards it. That's courage. It doesn't mean you will be fearless. It means both and. You feel the anxiety, you name it, and you do something that is 10% more than you would have done before. Cultivating courage. It's not enough to be focused and know that you're responsible. It's not enough to have the courage to go forward. You have to do it, as I mentioned, in this gritty situation, applying yourself in particular when you don't feel like it. That is, to me, one of the sort of really challenging elements of life, to show up and keep doing what you've committed to doing when you don't feel like doing it. So what we want to do is we want to work when we're motivated, right? I want to be pumped up. I want to be motivated. Well, if I work only when I'm motivated, I've calculated this on my calendar, it's like 3.5 hours a week. And I love my job. And I talked to my friend Michael. He's going to Hawaii. And my friend Jeff is now in Ecuador. I saw that Chrissy is in St. Martin. I hate Facebook for that reason. Because my life just seems so dull by comparison. And then I'm like, well, I'm not that motivated. Let me wait till I'm motivated. It's not going to happen that way. You commit yourself. That's what grit's all about. Passion and perseverance towards long-term goals. Passion and perseverance towards long-term goals. Not when you feel like it, not when you're excited, not when you're motivated, not when you're enthusiastic. The opposite. When you're disheartened, frustrated, burned out, disappointed, that's when grit becomes the issue. And grit is something that, this is West Point Military Academy. You guys heard of it? Premier Academy, old academy, 150, 160-year-old academy. They've developed over the years the whole candidate score. So they want to basically assess each one of the candidates that comes in on how likely are they to survive the first 2 months or so of this intensive, weeding out process. So they get 10,000 applicants, they take about 1,500 cadets, and then they put them through this couple of months of really intense testing to weed out the ones that will ultimately remain as the going forward officers, right? Kind of like getting a job here as a supervisor, right? And so what they've done is they've developed this whole candidate score. So it's a physical test, right? It's intellectual and cognitive tests, and it's leadership potential tests. And what they want to do is, how do we know that we're taking the best of the best that will stick through? The reason I'm telling you this is, so a few years back, Martin Seligman, if anyone's heard of Martin Seligman, he used to be the president of the American Psychological Association. He created the term, he coined the term learned helplessness in the 60s, when his research found that poverty was actually being passed down generationally through cultural pressure or cultural teaching. And then he came up with positive psychology about 15 years ago. Anyone heard of positive psychology? It's kind of a healthy psychology, right? What does it take to be a high functioning? Because psychology emerged as a disease state fix. And now it's evolved into what does it mean to be optimal, right? High functioning. So in positive psychology, one of the things they identified is grit, this passion and perseverance towards long-term objectives. One of Seligman's students is Angela Duckworth, And she really focused in on the research on grit. She identified 12 questions. So there's a 12-question grit survey. I can email it to you. I have downloaded it. It's 12 short questions, pretty simple. And she says it's predictive of grit. And she went to West Point and said, I tell you what, for 150 years you've been developing this score. I bet you that mine can be more predictive than yours. I don't know that she actually said that, but that's how I like to tell it. Because, it's cooler that way. And in my mind, they said, no way, no way. And she said, yeah way. And they said, all right, we'll test it. And so for 3 years, they ran the two assessments side by side. They still gave this whole candidate score, and they gave the grit survey. And because it only takes a few months to get through the whole thing, you get the results pretty quick, right? Because who stayed and who went? And was they predicted to stay, or were they predicted to not make it? The grit survey, 12 questions, was like 30% more predictive than their whole candidate score. See? You make a point on that. It's more predictive than this whole candidate score because grit is the single greatest predictor of achievement. Not intellect, because there are lots of smart people that just bomb out horribly. You probably know some, right? They just didn't rise to the occasion with their intellect. It's not money, because there are people who have, access to funding that just can't make it happen. It's not connections. It's not birth order. I'm the oldest. This ain't working for me. It's grit is the single predictor. Do all these other things matter? Yes, of course. If you have more money, if you have more connections, if you have a good network, that all matters. But the people who are the most likely to achieve, the greatest predictor of achievement is grit. In a leadership role, you can see where this plays in, right? It's you as a leader showing up when you don't feel like it. It's you as a leader doing what needs to be done with others. And I'll talk about that here in a second. This, to me, is one of the greatest sort of limiting beliefs of the American culture. Who is this guy? Yeah. I know this because I watched reruns when I came here to go to college. The Lone Ranger. And when I came to the States, it was like, oh yeah, John Wayne, the Lone Ranger. There's all these mythological creatures that had to do with I alone. I alone. Now, you can see how that is not really leadership. Leadership is a relational competency. Leadership is a team effort. Leadership is a collaboration. If it's just you, you're not leading. If you're walking down the street and you're all by yourself, you're out for a stroll. That's not leadership. So the Lone Ranger is not working for you. The Lone Ranger is not working for Scripps. The Lone Ranger is not working in a leadership role. What's working, oh, by the way, he was not freaking lone. I mean, that struck me a few years later. What the hell? Who's that guy? The whole mythology is weird to me, The Lone Ranger, and Tonto. So, just get over it, so to speak. You're not going to do this alone. And grit, which seems like such an individual element, doesn't actually work best on your own. Grit as a team sport is something you can elevate if everybody pulls together when you're disheartened, frustrated, disenchanted, tired. That's when it works really well. And here's 3 things for you to consider on how do you cultivate more grit in yourself and in the people around you. The first thing is, why? Why are you doing what you're doing? How many of you have in the last, when was Epic rolled out? April 1st. Wow, you guys know that. Woo, okay. That's like the first unison answer I've had all hour, right? April 1st. April Fools, that was funny, right? And by the way, I was talking with, where's Michelle? I was talking with Michelle, said, you called it epic? Do you know what, you name something, you call it into being? Why don't you call it easy? Why don't you call it smooth? Epic. You get what you call it. Where was my point? Purpose. Right, the grit. How do you show up when you're fatigued, disheartened, frustrated, disenchanted? How you show up is first and foremost, you have to answer your own personal question, why? Why am I here? What's my purpose? What's my purpose as a human? What's my purpose as a leader? What's my purpose as a citizen of this business community? If you don't have a clear answer on what your purpose is, then you're just being beaten around by these random occurrences. If you say, my purpose is to spread love on the planet. My purpose is to solve problems in a way that really serves the community. My purpose is to connect with people in a meaningful way and have fun together. I don't know what your purpose is, but what is it? Do you? Because if you don't know it, you're in trouble. I know what my purpose is. I know my business purpose is to sharpen the minds and broaden the hearts of leaders. That's what gets me into work, to sharpen the minds and broaden the hearts of leaders. I love that. It actually has energy for me. If I can help leaders think more effectively and relate more from the heart, I've done a good job, as far as I'm concerned. What's your purpose? Because the purpose then gives you goals, personal goals, professional goals, business goals. So the purpose is the first thing to identify. The purpose is not enough, because what happens when you get purpose, which is the anchor, is then you can identify, well, what are the practices? What are the practical daily activities that I can do over and over to get closer to my purpose? And that's where the grit comes in, right? Why am I doing it? And what am I going to do on a day-to-day, interaction by interaction level? And this is where you get discipline. This is where you get, would anyone here like to be more disciplined? No? All right, maybe not. I saw some heads nodding. Maybe the hand is too much. You guys are really good at conserving energy. I totally respect that. I find that the people who are already pretty disciplined is usually the ones that want more discipline. The people who are not disciplined don't care. Weird kind of thing. Maybe not weird at all. They have no discipline. They don't care. So, what's, a lifetime of discipline. You've met folks like that, right? Discipline, like they eat a certain way, or work a certain way, or exercise a certain way, or relate to people in a certain way. So here's what I'd like you to consider. There is no such thing as long-term discipline. It's just no such thing. Why is there no such thing? Because discipline happens now. What is the essential idea of discipline? What is the fundamental point of discipline? It's choice, right? I say to myself, I'm going to eat healthy. And I walk to the back of the table there, and there's like really cool stuff, none of which fits my idea of what healthy is in the moment. Because I'm trying to avoid sugar and salt and, that looks so delicious. So I stand in front of that table, and there's there was a couple ladies who were talking to, right? And I literally see a little angel, little demon. Eat it. Don't eat it. Have the cookie, just one. No, you said you wouldn't. In that moment, you make a choice, right? In that moment of choice, that's discipline. Either you followed through on your commitment or you didn't. My point is, if you don't have purpose, how are you going to make choices that are consistent with a certain direction? And the practices are those choices that you make day by day to reinforce the purpose. And the last part is, who are you working with? Who are your partners? Who are your support system? Who are your coaches, mentors, co-workers, peers? Who's going to help you when you are flagging, when you're tired? Who's going to encourage you? Who's going to remind you? Who's going to support you? Who's going to love you? Who's going to say, that's okay, you fell down, get up, we'll do it again. Because the Lone Ranger wasn't even alone. So if you want to be a Lone Ranger, it means you have to have at least one good partner. And a horse, whatever that means. So, you can develop and cultivate grit. There really is a way to do that. Purpose, which leads to goals. Practice, which says, what am I going to do and what choices do I make? And then the partners, who am I going to do it with? And it is so critical as a leader, again and again and again. Leadership is a team effort. When you're doing it on your own, in that moment, you may be doing wonderful things. But if you want to make them even more impactful, it becomes, who else do I involve? How do I delegate? How do I share? How do I empower? Whoa, big questions. I only have a few minutes left, so I can't answer them right now. But those are the questions to be grappling with. And so I'll leave you with this last virtue that I want to talk about, which is this virtue of faith. And faith to me is about this. Leadership begins at the edge of your comfort zone. And you're thinking, he's just paid to say that. I deeply believe that to be true. I deeply believe it to be true that leadership begins at the edge of your comfort zone. The comfort zone is something that just, well, we'll come back to that. Teaser. The comfort zone is, in my opinion, misnamed the comfort zone. Give me some adjectives about the comfort zone. Comfortable? Very good. That's an easy one. Was it? Complacent? Safe? Predictable? Familiar? Effortless? I think the real name for the comfort zone is the zone of least effort, right? Because you have perhaps experienced in your life being in a comfort zone that is remarkably uncomfortable, emotionally, financially, relationally. Ever been in a job, I mean, not in this crew, but maybe your friends have been in a job that you were like, man, I want out of here for the last 2 years. But you're in your comfort zone, right? Ever been in a relationship that you're in a comfort zone, but it ain't comfortable and it's not serving you. And so leadership begins at the edge of your comfort zone. The leap of faith is the willingness to step out of that comfort zone. I put up a picture here. This is a hand-built cabin. I built it. It took me 3 months in the woods and the mountains of New Mexico. The picture is more recent. It was last summer. I actually took my family up there for the first time. But I ended up at one point saying, I'm too comfortable in my job. And I'm conflicted because I really wanted a deep dive into spiritual practice and undistracted meditation. Yeah, everyone? No? And so I wanted to know what would it be like to be undistracted and totally dedicated to a meditation practice. This is about 11 years into a very, very structured meditation lifestyle that I was doing and working. So I was working, 3M, Corning, and I was meditating, and I was like, I need to feel this. The comfort zone was both. Anyway, I went to my boss, Kaz, and I said, I quit. He was, oh, by the way, I was his mentee, he was my mentor, and he was promoting me into the GM track. I said, I quit. He's like, you what? You can't quit. I said, no, I quit. I'm going to go to the mountains and meditate. It's like, what is wrong with you? And so I quit. I got rid of all my possessions. I liquidated my 401k and gave the money away in donations. I shaved my head, gave away my dogs, bought an old truck, and drove up in the mountains. I built this cabin, 625 square foot cabin, and I spent a year in there, in silent retreat. Those what? Electrical plumbing. There's the practical guys. I dig it. Yeah. So yeah, there was electrical plumbing. I can show you the blueprints if you want, but yeah, it was permitted. The guys came up there to permit it. They're like, "What are you doing up here, in the middle of the mountains, and why are you permitting it?" But I wanted to get in, I wanted to get out of a comfort zone of this life that was no longer really fulfilling me and explore fully a life that was. And so a year into it, I had this revelation that I'm doing it all wrong. That I should get married and have children and do a service to community. And I remember thinking, I have no money, I have no job, and while this is how I look today, this is how I came out of the cabin. So I was pretty sure that I'd once again set myself back on the relationship thing. Yeah, women were lining up to run away from that. I was right around the time of Ted Kaczynski, which was not really working for me, but I was clearly challenging my comfort zone, right? And all of yours, yes, thank you. And so I had stepped out of one world, stepped into the other. I thought I'd be comfortable in this world of meditation and reflection, realized it wasn't the right track. I should go back and look like this guy, right? I love what razors can do, And a few calories. Yeah. I look a little emaciated. When I went into the cabin, I weighed 220 pounds. When I came out of the cabin, I weighed 180 pounds. It's called the seclusion diet. Anyone want to try it? Yeah. So, my point is that it takes real commitment to step out of the comfort zone, right? It's not just courage, it's a leap of faith. It's beyond the day-to-day courage. It's the willingness to follow what you believe to be true and important, necessary for you, for your people. The leap of faith oftentimes is not just about you. And so there's the comfort zone. We talked about it. Beyond the comfort zone is what? Everything that you're not currently experiencing. Everything that you want that you don't have is outside the comfort zone. Sorry, I didn't make up. I'm just reporting the news. Right? And so there's a growth zone. The growth zone is where potential is, where growth is, innovation, change, improvement, addition. All those things are in the growth zone. And it's the willingness to step out of the comfort and into the growth. Now, as a leader, that's part of your job with other people on your team, is to challenge the comfort zone. And why? Because the inherent nature of leadership is balancing results with uncertainty. And everything is going to constantly change. And when it constantly changes, like this thing, thank you, you have to engage with it. That means stepping out of the comfort zone. Not because you're being mean, but because you're being a good steward of your responsibility. Beyond the comfort zone, by the way, is the panic zone. I think you're in it now. And maybe you're coming back into the growth zone. But one of the challenges of leadership is to negotiate that space. How do we go out from the comfort zone to the growth zone? Not so far out that we are freaking out. There's an inverse relationship between stress and intelligence. The more stressed you are, the more simple your decisions become, the less creative they are. And the more stressed you are, the less likely you are to work with other people, the more you go into survival. And so you want to step out of the comfort zone and feel, are you too far out? Are you in the panic zone? And some of the ways that you can do this, one, breathing. Do you know what the definition of, well, this is the wrong audience because I'm probably going to be wrong. I was going to ask a medical question. Whoops. When I was trained as a rescue diver, they taught us, so now I'm going to look to all the people with white coats to verify this or not, that the medical distinction of shock is the absence of oxygen to the cells. Is there truth to that? Well, we'll go with that. that shock, part of shock is absence of oxygen. When the system runs out of oxygen, it is in a shock state. And think about when you're anxious. What do you typically stop doing? Breathing. That's not working for you. It's just as simple as 3 deep, full breaths, and you already have a changed state. I'm running out of time, but we have time for 3 breaths, right? Here, do it with me. Take 3 deep breaths at your own rate, right? Sit up, take 3 full breaths. Feel a little more mellow, right? I do. I don't care about you, really. I'm just mellow right now. This whole thing was just to relax my own system. Breathing is a big deal. It's a big deal. When you want to step out of the comfort zone, breathe, oxygenate. Here's the other thing, gratitude. We tend to focus on the things that are not working, and we forget the fact that there are so many things that are working well. If nothing else, you're healthy, you're sitting, you're here. You're sheltered, you're safe, you're engaged, you have opportunities. If you look for things to be grateful for, more things show up that you appreciate. Gratitude is an act of appreciation. Gratitude is a profound leadership act. Gratitude is responded with appreciation. Gratitude means that I pause, recognize, put myself not first but second in appreciation of something else. And in times of change, we tend to really focus on what needs to be fixed, what needs to be done, what needs to happen next, what's not working, where do we have to put more efforts and resources. Wake up in the middle of the night, oh, we should do this. Sound familiar? I bet you that there's not a lot of bandwidth going to gratitude. If you want to be more effective in the change process, the leap of faith, gratitude is a phenomenal element that you can draw on. And the last one is just don't make it all about you. How can you be in service to others? Leadership, at the end of the day, is a servant leadership role. It's an act of giving, not just receiving, not just doing, not just accomplishing, but giving, serving. How do I help others? It really changes the game from scary to giving, to service, to together. Because when you're in this fear mode, it's all about you. When you're in a service mode, it's about us. And if you can make this game about us, it will happen faster, better, and in a more fulfilling way than if it's all about me. So, the last thought I'll leave you with is leap of faith. Why is it important to surrender, to let go of your fixed state? And I'm seeing Kyle is like a crab. I don't get it. I don't either, because it has nothing to do with what I'm about to tell you, but it gets people's attention. You guys have walked along the beach here, right? Please tell me that you're still taking time to go to the beach. You live like, come on, this is San Diego. Have you seen empty crab shells on the beach? Do you know where they're coming from, or do you really not care? I cared, and so I studied it. And crabs are exoskeletons. You guys know what an exoskeleton is? Humans are endoskeletons, right? Our bones, our hard parts are on the inside, exoskeleton hard parts on the outside, the shell. So what happens is when a crab grows to a certain size and they're frozen in their solid shell, they can grow no more. They are now as big as they will be in that form. In the human form, we get to a certain size, and if we freeze there, we grow no more. So what the crabs do is they molt. That's the word I believe it's called, molt. And you know how they molt? Some of you might know this. Nah, nobody here. Okay, so they're in the water. They basically somehow fill themselves with fluid, with water, right? They suck it into their body. They fill up their muscles and their shell, and they fill up so much. At some point, the shell actually, there's a seam along the shell pops. Now they're in this shell that's broken, and what they do is they lodge themselves between two rocks, and then they exit out of the shell, literally like one leg, and then the other leg, and then the little antennas, and the little heads, and now I've never seen this on video, it's going to be really weird, but the crab is out of the shell. Do you know what they're now technically called? A soft-shell crab, right? And they are like the target of every living, feeding creature in the ocean and on the land. A soft-shell crab. Every crab, in the moment of growth, releases their hard outer shell and becomes a soft-shell crab. Why is that important to you as a leader? There's got to be something here that tells. Okay, good. There is one, because it's the only way that the crab will grow. Ergo, for the leader. If you are too hung up on the way things have been and are not willing to surrender that, step out of the comfort zone. The comfort zone at some point is a cage. It's a shell. And willingly stepping out of that comfort zone means that immediately you have the opportunity for growth. The other thing that the crab does when they molt that shell is they cleanse. The parasites, the barnacles, the things that have clung to the shell, now they're washed away. He has a fresh start, or she has a fresh start. What are the barnacles? What are the parasites in you? No, I don't know what's going on in your body. I'm talking about metaphysically. They're other people's opinions. They're limiting beliefs. They're old notions. They're outdated ideas. They're old skills that don't serve you anymore. Old relationships that don't work anymore. Stepping out of the comfort zone allows you to grow and allows you to cleanse and refresh. And the third thing that's really interesting, at least to me, about these crabs is it's the only time they can procreate. Wait. Don't go there. I'm not saying that this is what you should do as a leader. I'm saying that the procreation in a leadership role is the ability to transmit and transfer your knowledge and wisdom and grow and serve other people. This is your opportunity to step out of the comfort zone and be vulnerable. You can grow, you can cleanse, and you are incredibly effective in engaging other people when you're not defended, when you're out of the old comfort, easy, familiar, half-sleeping consciousness that you are in. It's a commitment to leadership. It's a commitment to people. It's a commitment to mission. And so, the 4 virtues of a leader. Focus. What am I creating? You are responsible for and engaging in the experience of your reality with your team. Courage. What am I avoiding? Find those things that are causing you to be anxious. Acknowledge them and move towards them. Not about being fearless. Grit is to do what needs to be done for a purpose, not just organizational purpose, but your own purpose, in particular when you don't feel like it. And then faith, willingly letting go of what's outdated and stepping into the growth so that you can grow and you can serve in that way. Last thought here is from Walt Whitman, a great poet from the 19th century, American poet. And what I like about it is it introduces this idea that is very important to me called he didn't say it, this is my language, but I like his poetry. Many me's. Many me's. There's more than one me hanging in here. There's more than one you. There are many me's. So, Friday night, and my wife says, we're going to dinner with the Williams. And I immediately think, oh, great. Because part of me wants to go, and part of me wants to what? Not go. It's Friday night. I'm a shell of a human at that point. I don't want to go out, but part of me wants to be social, part of me wants to hide in my room. Is that crazy? No. So we accept that I can have many parts, right? Is the part of me that wants to go out the authentic part, or the part of me who wants to stay home the authentic part? That's a stupid question. It's not even a real thing. Both are real. So my point is, there are many me's. You can be both distracted and focused. You can be fearful and courageous. You can be both lazy and gritty. You can be both stuck in the past and moving in the future. It is not an either-or proposition. And Walt Whitman said it beautifully. And this is what I leave you with. Hopefully this carries forward. Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. You're a leader. You are large and you contain multitudes. And awaken those multitudes to move with you. And it could be incredibly hard and lots of fun. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for inviting me. Good luck on your journey.